Right, Jess, Anna, welcome. We're just going to go straight into the hard questions. So let's start with the big picture. Can you talk to me about and describe your coaching philosophy? So I don't mind who goes first. Jess, let's start with you.
You don't mind, but Jess. Yeah, I always think it's really difficult to articulate your coaching philosophy really clearly for others, because I do think it's something that's really intrinsic. It's obviously based on your value system and what's important to you. And I guess those things for me are around helping people. I care about people, but I'm also, the thing that gets me up in the morning is going after something that's either not been done before, but doing it with others and enabling others. So I guess fostering that kind of limitless belief in people or groups to go for something that they don't yet believe they're capable of. But I'd like to think I can be that person that pulls back the shutters for them and shoulder to shoulder just enables them to be the best version of themselves, however cliched that sounds. So I think, for me, integrity, trust, curiosity, creativity are things that I base my coaching philosophy on, and just real attention to detail and hard work. And we're all products of the experiences that we've had in life outside of sport and how we've been brought up and the environment that we've grown up in. So I would say, in quick summary, that limitless belief and fostering that in others and playing a role in doing that is the thing that really motivates me in terms of what I do. So that would most probably be a starter in how I go about my work.
Really. I think I was definitely waiting for you to say creativity. I was like, I wonder when she's going to say that, because I think it's not necessarily for other people to describe you as a coach, is it your coaching philosophy? But I think when I think about you as a coach, I definitely think about creativity and thinking about different ways that the norm can be done is something that I would definitely use to describe you. Just before we move to Anna, do you think you recognise it has evolved over time, or do you think those things have always been a part of your coaching?
I think that's a really good question. I think to recognise if it's evolved, you'd have to be really cognizant of your philosophy throughout your journey. And I think my understanding of what a philosophy is has most probably crystallised. But have I stayed true to the things and the values and beliefs? Absolutely. So I think I'm really authentic in how I go about my work. And I think that's the whole point with a philosophy. It's not the what you do, it's the how you go about your work. And so I'd like to think that actually I've stayed really true to that because my values haven't really shifted. I just think my understanding of what a philosophy is most probably clearer in my mind now. That would be my answer to that, really.
Yeah, I think that is important to recognise. I think it's really hard sometimes for coaches if we ask that question, what's your coaching philosophy? And they might think because they can't answer it, or maybe I don't have one, or maybe I'm not a good coach. But actually it is a really hard question and something that maybe we only start to recognise as we kind of grow throughout our coaching roles. Anna, so same question to you.
So I think while it's really hard to articulate it, and like you said, it's sometimes hard as you're kind of navigating, particularly at the start of your journey, it is the thing for me that I go back to at times when it's really hard. So actually, how does it play out in terms of my expression of my behaviours? So Jess has mentioned around the values. For me, honesty plays a big part and it's really important. Respect, the notion of care. And I know for me, that is definitely being instilled in me by my mother in particular. So in terms of the evolution of it and how then I try and interact and behave with others, I think it's probably then how I'm kind of living by that philosophy. And in turn, when things are really challenging, highs and lows, am I being true to myself and in particular those values and how I express it in my behaviours?
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to kind of bring to our awareness, because often when people are talking about their coaching philosophy, I think we can navigate it by saying, this is Sarah and this is Coach Sarah. But I think definitely I feel that if we're doing a really good job, those things are really closely aligned. I am wearing a different hat maybe because I'm doing a different role than when I'm at home. But actually I feel really passionate about being our true selves when we show up to coaching. I feel like that's where we'll be at our best, and I definitely recognise that in you two as well. So I think that's a really good nudge. We don't have to be somewhere we're not. And I guess if I can say, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I think maybe particularly as female coaches, we often feel like we might have to be and show different like attributes and be a bit stronger, or we don't always feel like we can quietly go about our business. We might feel like we have to be dominant because that's what kind of the society has taught us that good coaching looks like, but we can just be gentle, we can be caring.
Well, I think like caring for me still is like, you've heard me say that like clarity is kind, and actually, having some hard conversations doesn't take away from the fact you don't care about that person, but actually giving that clarity is kindness. So for me, again, around like how it's played out, the expression of it is, I'd like to believe that those I work with, whether it's staff or players, that they know I'm genuinely invested about them as people, first and foremost. So actually, I want to understand them. I want to get to know them, to understand fundamentally how I can get the best out of them and support an environment that gets the best out of them.
Nice. Should we talk about some good stuff? The bits that people might be like, think are our little secrets that we're hiding away. So let's talk about Rose's Way. So obviously, Jess, you've played a big role in sharing that, and then Anna's obviously now coming in, contributing to kind of Rose's Way. Can you both share like what that means to you in terms of, our coaching and the way that you kind of structure sessions? And we'll start with Jess again, because obviously that was kind of your thing that you worked on, but first. So, and then we can move to Anna.
Yeah, I think the important bit is like worked on and still working on, because I think one of the things that I was really passionate about when I came into the role, having been fortunate enough to represent the Roses back in the day and be in and around the environment in a coaching sense, even before coming into this role, is it's really sad when people couldn't articulate what our identity was as a team. And I think for too long, like it kind of frustrates me that we say we're a bit of this team and a bit of that team all put together. And I think that does this playing group a huge disservice, and it does our country a disservice, really. So I think the Roses, we talk about the Roses Way in terms of a Rose is and the way we play is. And I think some of that is still quite aspirational. I think we have a strong belief as to what that needs to look like to be successful. But our efforts in the last couple of years have been to really give credit to and respect this group of players and those still to come in terms of what they offer in their strengths. And I think we talk about high energy, tactical clarity and tactical diversity. And I genuinely believe that our tactical diversity, whether that's personnel, whether or not that's our strengths, our playing styles, we are not one thing, and therein lies our greatest strength. And I think it's just been the biggest challenge as to how to harness that, but also how to share that publicly so that people can speak far more confidently around what do the Roses play like, what's our playing identity. And I make no apologies for the fact that it isn't any one thing. I think the point is the difference is our thing. And I think over the last couple of years, I've got a much greater sense and confidence from the playing group that they too embrace that. And we don't apologise for that difference. And we see that as a fundamental strength against our toughest opposition. Actually, like in Australia, what they do is brilliant, but we know what it is. And I think we completely respect them for being expert at what they do. But do I look at their bench and do I fear their diversity? Not really. I look at ours and I celebrate that and think, wow, that's where we've got a slight upper hand. So I think, the high energy bit really plays to this team are really playful. And I think we've really tried to encourage actually and endorse the importance of joy in what we do. And I think you can sit on the top of a podium with a lovely gold medal and feel really empty and hollow inside. And I've either been around teams or listened to great stories of other sporting champions or teams. And that isn't what I want for this group. I want there to be the sense of joy and the gold medals. And I think you can go after both. And I think both are really important because I think they lead to the other. So I think from a playing style, that high energy speaks to the playfulness of the group. It speaks to the high demand that they have of each other. We talk about championing, being a student of the game ourselves, but also championing the improvement of those around us. And I think when we talk about what a Rose is, often you'll hear language around, autonomous, independent, thinkers, decision makers, things that you would associate with any team sport, but it's the ones that we're pulling in closest to us, and like kind of that relentlessness, the grit. You'll hear the players speak of themselves, and I think we've proven and got tons of evidence now in terms of our resilience and our grit, whether that's tangibly about coming back when we're behind or seeing out opposition when it's going goal for goal in a semi-final before a World Cup. Of course, there are those things that are easy to kind of like see, touch and feel. But I think it's in the day on day, like the way in which I think we're getting better at holding ourselves accountable. And they are going after things now, believing that it can be done, rather than feeling like they're the bridesmaid and never the bride. So I think, I could go on around the Roses way, but I think high energy, tactical clarity and diversity. And that tactical clarity comes from really understanding our role, then play into the strengths of each other and collectively play into the strengths of our team, which I think the diversity bit, it means everything to us, yeah.
And I guess, Anna, for you coming in, like, firstly, how helpful was that to have, like, Jess has been able to articulate, like, some of these things that were important, and just, like, what are your thoughts on some of the stuff that Jess shared and the things that she's kind of set out as this is what we believe are our greatest strengths, like the tactical diversity?
I think there's a couple of things Jess has reinforced. Like we're still going after it. It's still an evolution, an aspiration, and I think those things for me, with the bold ambition of going where no England team's been before, you have to have those things to go after, and it makes it really exciting. Like I love the fact we celebrate, we champion the fact that we have such great diversity, whether it's diversity in athleticism, diversity in thinking, diversity in the fact that in our units that we can tactically implement a different strategy, whether it's through personnel or same personnel out there, but they can tactically have real clarity, have real conviction and confidence in what we're doing. That is like the gold ultimately. And that's what, the beauty of when you're trying to support and create an environment that enables and enhances that and celebrates that. That's why I want to get up in the morning and contribute to a programme that I genuinely believe is on a journey that they're going after something, that we've never done before, which is very exciting.
And I guess through the Roses Way, some of that informed like the Roses Development Framework, which is on the website, and I've been sharing some of that recently with coaches within the pathway, and maybe not the same words as what you guys have kind of shared there, the exact same words, but a lot of that stuff is kind of the same. And I think when we think about those coaches working with the pathway, working with those young athletes aspiring to kind of like be a Rose, what kind of things do you think like coaches should be looking out for, and like what are the things that kind of maybe we should be going after because we want players who can fit into that tactically diverse kind of, playing styles and stuff? Anna, do you want to go?
Sure. So I think there's some characteristics or behaviours that would certainly align. So being bold, being brave, whether it's like physically seeing someone like go out of the circle, go and hunt for a ball, but then their recovery and their intent to get back and disrupt, whether that kind of is expressed in someone's ability to take on the shot at a critical time in a match or turn to post and actually not be, fearful, so fearless. So I think there's some behaviours that I think we could look out for that are beyond those physical capabilities that certainly aligns with that tactical diversity that we're going after for sure.
What do you think?
Well, I do think that the physical and technical aspects of the game, I truly believe, can be learnt, whereas I think the attitudinal piece and the character and the behaviours are something that I think if you see them really early on in an athlete's journey, I don't always believe those things, or I'm not as confident that those things can be learnt or taught. So I think that for me is the bedrock to, my daughter's 13 now, so she's going to all sorts of netball trials, which is interesting to be on the other side of that. And like when you scan these like 3 courts with like 150 girls all of the same age, it isn't just the technical and tactical things that kind of draws me to somebody. It's kind of like seeing the interactions between them and a coach or their peers, or when they leave the court and maybe they've not performed as well, what do they do about it? Like I'm kind of scanning the landscape for those things as much as the technical and tactical, because you can build on those. But I think the bedrock or at the core of something has to be an openness to challenge, to change, to improvement, a curiosity to want to be better and show progress and willing to do that. Not every person can take on information and implement it straight away, but I think that's where attitude comes into play, because I can get a sense of that from Anna, whether or not she can do it today or she does it next week or next year. As long as there is a genuine intent to try, I think I wouldn't underestimate the behaviours piece is what I'm saying. But I think, of course, we're going to be looking out for some raw talent. And I think that's where it is our job and our duty, actually, to kind of help everybody out there to understand what are those things to look for, but also allow time and space, depending on the age and stage of somebody's journey, there's got to be room for error and there's got to be room to make mistakes. And I'd encourage that as much as I would looking for the perfection, because there's no such thing. So I think that's where the behaviours and attitude and mindset, I think we've got to be better at understanding what to look for in that space, because I think the physical bit is easy, it's relatively objective, it can be measured. But I think those softer things, the things that you can only kind of feel, we have to be better as to how skilled we can be to look out for those and enjoy kind of looking for them as much as we do, the player that stands out. And often when I see a player get an interception, I'm looking around them as to who and what else contributed to that. And it's those kind of like unsung heroes that often don't get the credit because we turn to the noisy bit. I don't mean noisy as in voice, but I mean the noisy movement or, that's great and it should be celebrated, but so should your role in that and actually give some credit to that. So yeah, I think we've got some work to do and I guess our duty is to help keep sharing what are those things and characteristics to keep looking out for that might make the difference later on in their journey, depending on how big their ambition is. And hopefully it is to one day play for the Roses.
And I think keep the conversation going. So diversity of thinking is really important. So while Jess might say X and Y, I might say A, B, C. But actually, let's be curious about why is that caught your attention and why are you thinking that? So I think not only in terms of the information that's being shared, but how we're receiving that, and then how we kind of challenging back and being curious about it. So I think continue to champion and diversify our thinking as coaches and what we're paying attention to and how we're paying attention to it.
I think when I'm hearing you guys describe that, it makes me think of the little dial that we talk about around the things that we dial up and down in a session. So if we're doing a session that's like really physical, the trade-offs might be that we don't get enough time for decision making, or there might not be enough test in the psych corner or something. And if we're recognising that some of these other skills help contribute towards like a really good athlete, it's just like a really good reminder for coaches that actually we need to think about the stuff that we're doing, that it covers all of those four bases. Like if we stay really high on physical and technical, we're going to get really good athletes that can perform in those areas. If we're not like dialing up the things that allow us to make good decisions or show that we're brave and bold or show that we can be relentless or that there's high trust in that unit and then we keep going on balls even when we're not getting them, like we're not going to get that as an output. So I think thinking about our practices and those little dials and trade-offs, like how can we get more of that bold and braveness, that more decision making is really important.
I think the way you set up the environment is absolutely key, because I think most of your coaching is done through the way in which you set the environment up, because coaches move on, it's me one day, it might be you the next, it could be Anna, like that bit isn't necessarily the stable part, but the way in which you set your environment up for learning, I think is where I know I pay most of my attention. And then my style or the way in which I go about my business might really align with your view of me as a coach, and you might really bounce off that, but it might not for you. And so I think if the environment is doing most of the work, I'm never going to be everybody's cup of tea. Even in this role, I won't be everybody's cup of tea. And most of that is formed by what exposure have they had to certain coaching styles, coach delivery. That's not a reason for me to not stay true to who I am, but of course I need to be able to flex. But I'm a big believer you've got to get the environment right. And then I think things around my style are almost like the unique bit that I will bring. And I will be mindful and cognizant and aware of, for some more than others, that might really help. And as long as I'm not doing harm to anyone, the environment, in essence, should do a lot of the work, really. And that's where I'd like to think that we pay quite a lot of attention, really, in how we set things up.
It's a nice little segue to this next question. I guess, and I touched on it, and then I guess you've built on it, but a lot of the coaches out there coaching in such a wide variety of spaces, so like performance or participation, coaching our lovely little bee netballers. And I think what can coaches really be thinking about? What can they be modelling, either whether it's behaviours or whether it is something like practice design or the way that they're setting their environment to kind of really support and help our pathway flourish so we get more roses? Like what would you really ask them to kind of like be thinking about or reflecting on the journey home? Like, have I done that today or this week?
I can tell you, is it all right to share a learning from when I was new into coaching and the mistake I made? Because I think there's some like retrospective bits. So I remember sharing this, like for the first few years when I started coaching, I found myself just telling the players I was working with everything I knew, because I think I couldn't remember how I'd learnt stuff. So I didn't know how to coach, but I was just imparting knowledge. And so I guess I'm not saying this is like the best piece of advice, but I think it was really like years down the line, I became really sensitized to that and realized that all I was doing really was in my efforts to gain credibility, I was telling them a lot of information, but that wasn't necessarily coaching. So I think one of the things I think is something to just bear in mind is being really selective with what you're sharing and why, and being quite deliberate and intentional with instruction. And there's place for instruction. There's also place to guide people, obviously, through their learning, and then to be really skillful with the questions you ask. But I made a lot of mistakes. I most probably still am making a lot of mistakes. But early on, in my efforts to really care about people and want to share, that didn't really get them to improve. So yeah, that would be just something, just sharing a quick learning really. And out of any mistake, there's always something brilliant to come from it, as long as you become aware of it. So that was just something that sprung to mind as you were talking, because I can just hear myself now. I don't know what I was doing really.
Well, I guess you do because you articulated that really well. And I think there'll be lots of coaches out there that have learned how to coach, and we do copy because you describe a lot of times like the coaches that you've worked with and how inspiring that they've been on your journey, and you've picked up bits from here, you'll have picked up bits from different environments. And we do that until we find our own way. Like much like our philosophy evolves, we do that until we find.
It's like an initial roadmap.
Yeah. Well, I was going to be all Brené Brown then and be like, our true self, until we find our true self, like who we want to be with our coaching, with our values and all of that stuff, like perfectly aligns. I think we do copy. I think we're going to make a million mistakes. The important part is that so will the children, so will the athletes. And so we can be patient with them and patient with ourselves while we try to navigate, because coaching is difficult and it is really difficult, and it's important that we recognise that sometimes it's going to go well, sometimes it's not going to go so well, and that's just normal.
Yeah. And I think just on that point around when there's going to be ups and downs with everything, remaining really adaptable. So I think when you talk about being brave and bold, I think as a coach, like I know again very cliche, but being okay sitting in that really uncomfortable space, being led through a session by what you see, not what you planned 2 days ago that looks really great. And sticking to that at all costs. Like, I think the joy that I get from coaching the most is giving myself permission to have a framework of something that we need to go after and like the intended outcomes, but then really enjoying seeing it play out and actually being pleasantly surprised by I wasn't expecting that. And then in the moment thinking, what do I do with it? Is it something I act on now? Is it something I observe and just skillfully ignore and then plan for what I do with that? But I think that adaptability is really important, because I think that's where the magic can happen. But that takes a degree of confidence and vulnerability. And in the same way, like you say, we're all going to make some mistakes. It's okay if you're clumsy with that, as long as, again, it's not going to do any harm. But I think being led through sessions and going in a different direction is most probably where I get my most enjoyment from. But is it scary? And is it scary as a new coach or a young coach? Absolutely, because the thing that gives you confidence is clarity, and clarity is often in the plan. And then to kind of veer away from that can be quite scary. But I would encourage people to actually embrace it, because I think that's when you start to give a little bit of kind of ownership back to the players, however young or old. And then they can see in you that you've been willing to kind of like shift with that.
Well, it's like you're responding to what you're seeing in the moment. You're actually in the moment, aren't you? As opposed to, well, this was the plan and I'm sticking to the plan. So I'm prepped rather than the plan. Like I'm responding to what I'm seeing play out, and how how the players are responding to that stimulus. I think it's a really great point around adaptability, and for me being present in that moment in time to be able to respond accordingly.
I think that's where coaches can be at their best, but I just want to point out it's not easy to get to that point, because like when we're novice, like the plan is a really important part of that process,
and gives security, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think as we kind of develop and we gain some confidence, I think having that plan is almost like our little roadmap, if you like. And then often the best sessions do not follow that roadmap because we're adaptable. But yeah, as you pointed out, like it is really tough. The thing that was making me feel nervous, thinking back to my memories in those situations, is parents on the sideline. So the session's going in a chaotic manner, and there's like 20 parents on the side just eyeballing you, going, what is happening here? And it might not look pretty, but yeah, I think it is scary, but I think that's why coaching is its most beautiful, when it's just adapting to what the players are showing you in the moment.
I think in terms of that judgment piece that you've highlighted there, though, Sarah, like how we prime and work with those athletes and their support network is really important. So that doesn't actually get in the way of us doing what we genuinely feels like the right thing to do in that particular session or that particular moment. And I think that's a real natural response to feel judged, or they might not even be looking at your session. Like that's the reality. They might not even be, they might be on the phone or not paying attention to it. But I think that is the reality. And whether, it's someone coming in that steps into that space just to support you, still feeling judged. Like you want to present the best version of yourself, don't you? And you want people to like and support what you're doing. So I think just that piece around priming, setting up for success with your players and with their support network can alleviate or at least mitigate some of that feeling of judgment.
Yeah, that is a good point. They're probably looking at their work emails from the end of the day, thinking about what the shopping they've got to get on the way home, the millions of jobs that they're also juggling. Right, so let's think back to, so we've talked a little bit about your coaching journeys. So let's think about some really great advice that someone gave to you. So what did they say? How did it shape who you are? So it might be that like long lasting kind of thing that you're going, oh, like I'll always remember that. Anna, what do you think?
For me, one of the best bits of advice someone gave me was around listen to understand, not to respond. And for me, that was about like actually using like the power of silence and pause, and not waiting to like, oh, I've got something I want to say. So actually being present in that moment. But yeah, listening to understand, not to respond, I think it really resonated with me, because I think around like the whole value piece around respect and honesty and trust, that's a way in which I think I can build that with someone to show them I'm really present and I'm really listening to them and I value what they're saying, and I'm really trying to understand where they're coming from as opposed to just respond.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And I think if we could take that little top tip, advice, mantra, whatever we want to call that, and kind of apply that also to just the coaching space in general. So sometimes I think we're really good at filling the space, like I'm the coach, I'm in charge. We might just feel like we have to fill all of those spaces, where if we don't do that and we just watch, we're listening for the players' interactions, or we're kind of using that silence to observe in a more meaningful way, I think that would also kind of like be a really important thing for people to kind of experiment with.
Agree. And to add to that, I think like the power is in the pause, and do we step in because actually I'm feeling uncomfortable, as opposed to just giving them a bit of time to be able to think and to respond and digest and appreciate. And some people are going to respond really quickly, others are going to be thinking about it, and they might come back to it like later on. But I just think it's important that we do use that in a way in which enables others to, think, to voice their thoughts, their consideration, digest what we've obviously shared with them.
Yeah, perfect. Jess, some really great advice that was shared with you?
Again, this might sound a bit rogue, There's a lot of storytelling coming out here. But I started coaching when I was still playing, and this is going back a long time now. And I was sat on the subs bench at a Super Cup final, so we are talking a long time ago. And one of my mentors at the time was in the crowd, and he'd come to watch. And maybe with or without knowing fully, I was definitely more towards like the end of my playing potentially, but I maybe wasn't completely aware of that. And I started coaching, and I was fortunate enough to kind of coach at club level, university level. I was doing some England age group bits and pieces and journeying through my formal qualifications, my level 2, then my level 3. And I just remember at the end of the game, and we'd won the Super Cup. So it was like quite a momentous occasion. And when I finally got round to checking my phone, my mentor had asked me the question, when are you going to do it? And he meant it being coaching properly. And it was just, for me, it is quite a defining moment asking me that question, because what he was doing is he was really kind of like poking at, one, it made me really pause to think about what is coaching for the first time. Because I think the fact that I was doing lots of coaching didn't mean I really understood what coaching was and the coaching process. And obviously, you know, not known to me at the time, he obviously saw some potential in me to go on to do well in coaching. And I think what was great is his timing of it. I think the context of him sending that to me when I was most probably sat on the side of the bench and watching me, and the journey that I'd been on up until that point was a bit like, right, there's a difference between transactional coaching and really understanding what coaching is. And I know I say that from quite a privileged position, but I guess my learning from that was, one, make sure you understand what it is before you continue on the journey, and then make sure that where you're headed is aligned with your actions, because you can be quite passive, I think, in the process of coaching. You know, like in particular if you become relatively good or qualified at something, you'll have lots of opportunities thrown your way, and you might dip your toe in here and then dip your toe in over there, or this pays a lot of money, but this has got some really good players and I want to associate with that. And that's all great if that aligns with what you want to get from it. But obviously I had, to an extent, I already knew I wanted to give coaching like a really good go, to the point where I obviously retired relatively young from playing at 26. And what he was doing was he was making me press pause and take it and make the decision there and then how serious I was about it. And so I'm not saying everybody has to go where I went, but what he did was he asked the right question at the right time, which meant it gave me clarity to make the right decision for me to align and act in a way that was going to move me closer to that ambition. And I think sometimes we can get dragged into lots of things and be kind of jack of all trades and master of none, and we kind of lose sight of why it is we're doing what we're doing. Yeah. So I know there's a lot in there, but I guess it was advice through a question that was just very skillful at the time, because that's a mentor who understood my journey and had a sense as to the potential I showed to be good at it. But also, if I didn't start taking it seriously and understand what coaching was, I might lose time or get sidetracked, really. And I think coaching's tricky because you can get seduced by getting involved in lots of things. And then before you know it, you've kind of lost sight as to, is that really me? And I became quite clear early on that, you know, I'd get asked to do things in schools, or I'd get asked, do I want to do this job? And I started to form almost a bit of a shopping list as the things that were really important to me. And as much as I respect everyone who coaches in all different areas, you just have to stay true to what it is that you think your strengths play to and what you get from the coaching process. So I think there's lots in there, really. But yeah, taking it seriously, understanding what coaching is, not just doing coaching, and then aligning and acting in a way that moves you forward in the direction that you hope to go in.
The lovely piece that I hear there in that story that you shared is around how skillful that mentor was at asking that question in that moment in time. How the fact that you'd had that relationship with that mentor that is able to be that critical friend, be able to have that moment in time to enable you to reflect and just take stock and to pause and go, well, I've spoken about this is what I genuinely want to go after, but actually, what do I need to do in order to truly go after that? Yeah. So I love that.
Should we shout out mentors?
Absolutely.
I think they are an important part of coaches' journeys, aren't they? I had a similar experience like that. but it was probably a little bit more brutal. Like, Sarah, are you gonna, when you can only take coaching seriously when you stop playing?
Well, it's pretty much that is kind of what he was saying.
But I took it differently, so I chose to kind of ignore it and go, no, I believe that I can do both things at once. And it didn't work out very well. But I think the important part of that was, I still talk to him like now. He listened to something I did with netball actually. He was like, oh, that was so good. And he's just such an important person to reconnect back to. But yeah, I didn't listen that well. But I think that was indicative of like where I was at on my journey. Like I didn't know if I wanted to be a coach. It wasn't that strong in me at that point, and I was still very much in the midst of playing, and probably a bit delulu about that actually. Like, thought I was gonna go on and like chase a different dream with football. But I think that question, as much as I didn't react to it, still always sits with me. I can remember the moment, and I was just like, no, I can do this.
But that was that decision was made at that moment in time, based on the information that you had and the experiences you had, and there would have been some feelings playing out in that. And I think it's really great to hear about the relationships we hold with those mentors, or those mentors in that moment in time, and that openness to be able to hear it. Or maybe not, like you said, if I was to be asked that question now, actually, if I was to rewind it, I might make a different decision. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And having those experiences, I think, like, you made that decision at that moment in time, but you were really open to that.
And I also think that impact is timeless.
Yeah.
So there's no rule about whether or not you responded. You responded differently in terms of the action you chose to take in the moment, but the impact of him asking that is still most probably as great as when I got asked a similar question, because you've still gone on to make decisions, because you can't unhear it and you can't unread the message. So it will sit with you for as long as you decide if and when the impact is now most relevant.
And it definitely has informed my thoughts and feelings about working with coaches. You know, some of the coaches that I work with, or in other sports that might be transitioning out of sport into coaching, it definitely makes me think about like where everyone is at on that journey, and how to kind of like lean into supporting those people in terms of, you know, you're on the court one day, now you're not. So, and that can feel differently to everyone. Some people are really ready to kind of grab that coaching label, and some people, like, it's a little bit harder because they might still wish they were on the court, or they might still wish that they were engaging in their sport as a player. So yeah, I think an important kind of thing to understand. But shout out to mentors. They're an important part of our coaching journey.
Are we still on advice?
Oh, do you have some more?
Is it advice though?
Well, now let's go nice little segue to, let's just go like some really good, let's be fast and furious with this. Let's get practical.
I think
practical.
That was a hint that she's not happy with our answers. They've been long and slow.
No, because I did not say that. I was asking for us to I tried to make a tenuous link to that song, Let's Get Physical. I was asking us to, let's get practical. What are our top tips? What are our top tips for coaches? Like all coaches out there, right, we're trying to kind of, let's go on the basis that we want some really great decision makers. We want players to really be enjoying netball, right? We want them to be learning how to be great netballers. We want them to be tactically diverse. We want our little B netballers like rotating around, having fun, lots of different positions. So what are the things that we could be, you know, that could be really memorable? Like, you're now giving advice to those other coaches, like you got advice that stayed with you. So what kind of things do you think is important for us to kind of share with the coaching family? So
I've got two things. I think start with the end in mind. She's always going to laugh at me on that one.
Says that loads, guys.
And I guess if I bring that right back down to like session planning or design, like just make sure that anything you're doing has to speak to the demands of the game. So just don't lose sight of things around decision making. You know, like, is your practice, whether it's the start of the session, end of the session, middle, have you touched on that in any way, shape or form? Does it speak to the demands of the game that they're ultimately going to play? And that's, if they're anything like me as a player, all I ever asked in a session was, when are we playing the game? So I think just start with the end in mind. Don't lose sight of that. So what's the destination? And make sure that your session, your delivery speaks to that in whichever way, shape or form. And then the other one's like a bit of a taking a step back, like as a coach.
I thought you said 2.
This is the second one.
Oh, okay, just checking.
Anna can't count.
I've spoken faster, so that's the fast bit of the Fast and Furious, and now you can be furious at me.
Always.
I think the other one is, like, as a coach, don't wait to feel ready. So I think sometimes there's a perception of others, in my coaching journey anyway, where things have almost been handed to me, and it's just not true. I think you have to put your head above the parapet and you have to have a go. And I think don't wait for permission, let somebody else make the decision. So whether that's as formal as a job opportunity or it's saying yes to something that makes you feel uncomfortable, like seek those opportunities out and don't look at a job description and go, oh, because I don't meet a criteria, I'm not ready or I'm not qualified. Like, just put your name in the hat and let somebody else make the decision if you're ready. Because I think that can really hold you back. And I don't think I've got a single regret for putting my head above the parapet and having a go. And that doesn't mean anything's come easy. I think actually I've kind of sought those opportunities out and it hasn't always gone how I'd want. I don't get everything I want, but at least I've had a go and I've forced you to make the decision of whether or not you think I'm the right fit right now. And opportunities won't always come at the perfect time, but just grab them anyway and do things that do make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, good ones.
So just for clarity, going back a step, when we spoke around have the end in mind, and then also making sure we keep it as close to the game as possible. I took that as 2, so my maths in my head made 2. Just letting you guys know that.
I think I gave 2 and 3, 4 and 5 exactly. Very quickly.
I see.
Is that all right?
Yeah, fine.
But I would definitely advocate about the end in mind and making sure it's as close or true to the game as possible. So all joking aside, I think they're 2 really good top tips. So just letting you know that. And then I would just reinforce like having clear intentions, but also understand what are the unintentional or outcomes, consequences of that. And then the second one, make it fun. And it's not an age thing. It's not just about, oh, let's make it fun for the kids. Like, we love what we do because it is fun. The girls will love what we do. Not saying it's fun all the time, but let's still make it fun.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on a few things that you said because we're going to get in some nice little segues for things that we've been doing recently. So the game stuff, so just last week, I think it was, I delivered some CPD for some pathway coaches and we talked there about the importance of the game and how we can use game problems to support our practice design. So it's not necessarily about realism, it's about relevance. So that was the kind of little segue that I used because I think, Anna, you and I had a conversation about, and I used this example, of sometimes we might have a shooter who's struggling in the circle to try and create space or move about and open up some different spaces for their shooting partner. But we can't replicate that in our own training because actually maybe the defenders are given too much space. So we could put 3 defenders in there, which is not realistic, but it's relevant to the problem that we're trying to solve. So I think what we can do is take game problems, think about, what is the situation that we faced last week. But we do need more game because more game gives us the opportunity to like practice and recreate those kind of realistic scenarios that players need in order to be able to test out their knowledge. So really good ones. Being brave is really good. That's the theme for today, being brave and bold, not only for the athletes, but also for the coaches. And definitely I agree with you about make it fun. My little one would be kind. I think as coaches, when we've talked a lot today about maybe getting a bit nervous because the session's not going where it wants to go or we're feeling like we're being judged. And sometimes unintentionally, I think we can kind of get a bit sterner or we can feel quite scared and maybe that impacts our own coaches' behaviours. And I think if we can concentrate on kind of being kind in all of those moments, know that it's not a personal thing against us if the children aren't listening and they can't get their bibs on or they can't answer our questions, I think we can always make a conscious effort to be kind. So that's my little top tip. This is a really fun question that we're going on to now.
Is it?
Yes, it is. You've worked together for a very long time.
Just hit the tree.
So you guys have worked together for a long time, and it's something that we we talk about quite a lot in terms of that coaching relationship and how important it is. There'll be lots of people out there that personally I don't think they pay enough attention to what coaching in pairs looks like or what coaching in a coaching team might look like. So can you share some thoughts about your coaching relationship, why it works so well, and maybe what your thoughts are about like paying attention to that coaching relationship and working together as a pair? Who wants to go first?
Well, I don't think it actually matters who goes first, because we've had this conversation we've either been asked it a few times or we've had the conversation. But I think fundamentally the reason why this works well is because it is genuinely based on trust and respect as people, but then also as coaches. So I think it's very difficult to kind of like replace like coming through as players together. Like ultimately some of that took a different like route, and then we've played alongside each other, we've won and lost together, we then both show an interest in coaching, like, so that it's difficult to like recreate that, isn't it? Because that's just authentically like the journey that we've shared. And then when you've got a shared interest and then you share very similar values, which is different, by the way, to saying that we always agree, because I think there is a misunderstanding that I think when you're fortunate to have a personal relationship and then a professional one that is seen by the outside world is like, oh, well, they must just agree on everything because we get on. It's far from the truth, because I think that's when you know the coaching relationship is based on pure respect and trust, because then you've given permission to challenge each other without that feeling personal. Yeah. And I think that's where I guess we've got so many different and shared experiences now, you know, like co-coaching. I think one of the only coaches to actually co-coach at national level with the under-21s, I think they just couldn't make their mind up at interview. So I think we just got to co-coach him by accident more than design. But let's give credit to the people that interviewed us. Maybe it was the right thing to do.
Maybe they were very forward-thinking decision makers.
Maybe. But I think we've joked about that a few times around. I'm not sure there's many people that we know that could have most probably done that, because we were still quite early in our coaching journey at that level, and we were taking on a really big task with a really talented group, many of whom went and won the gold in 2018 in their senior career. And I think, again, it comes down to timing sometimes, doesn't it? You know, like we were most probably both thrown into something. We were really up for it, but the realities are we didn't really know what was ahead of us. And so the strength was in the collective there and then, because putting us both together was the right thing to do for the player group, of which we were familiar with. But yeah, I think it's built on trust, and it's built on loyalty and respect and credibility. So I respect Anna for what she's done and is doing in coaching, and I hope the same way this way. Awkward.
No, that was my power of the pause.
But yeah, I think that's the starter. Like that's the bedrock and the foundation of what it's built on. And I think it just means in lots of ways we can shortcut a lot of other things that other coaching teams or partnerships would have to work harder at, because it's not, I don't think this is the norm. I think this is relatively rare, because, you know, to know each other from when you're like age 10 or 11 and go on that journey, it's like players, you know, like that team in 2018 were ripe for success because they'd shared so much together, and not always great, you know, like they'd lost a lot together, but that builds something really special that then meant that they were able to go on and be successful. So it is quite unique. But yeah, you're much more articulate in this space. So I'm going to enjoy listening now.
You've stolen all my buzzwords. I also think there's a lot of love and a lot of fun to our relationship.
Right, let's remember that. There's a lot of love.
No, but you've already inferred like the duration, like the longevity, the highs and lows, like the shared experiences.
Just say, you know, when you guys talk about I always think that you're going to be like yesteryear, like you've been coaching for like 100 years.
Yes, 100
years. We look like it has. No, but I think to reinforce, like you've said it, it's definitely the foundation is our trust and our respect. And I know you said about the credibility, 100%. I do reinforce it. There's a lot of fun and there's a lot of enjoyment in terms of not actually agreeing all the time and being able to be curious, be creative, be innovative. Like, you know how much I value and champion. I think you're probably one of the most innovative coaches I've ever worked with.
Thank you. That's what you meant to say.
Thank you.
We've worked on this.
My point being, though, I do feel like we really value our points of difference. And we've said it a number of times, like we don't agree on everything, but we do see that as a huge strength in our partnership. And this is the best coaching partnership I've ever experienced. And I think that fundamentally puts us in a really good place. And so I joke about the love and the fun, but that is a core part of this relationship and why it will be and is successful.
I might ask Jack to put some love heart emojis over our eyes at this point.
I mean, but in all seriousness, none of that matters unless it benefits the teams we work with. So the way in which the value of this coaching partnership is mirrored by what we see in the players that we work with. And only then is it worth anything, because we can enjoy each other's company all day and not coach. You know, like, let's do that. But the point is that it's in how that translates into the players that we work with. And I think that's where you then get like the reflection back as to that's why I know it's special. And as long as there's return for the teams that we work with, which I think there is, then I think that's what makes it worthwhile. And that kind of then validates that how we feel is what we see in the teams that we work with. We wouldn't be happy if there would be no point, really. You know, could talk all day about each other, but it's the receivers of that mean the most to me.
Absolutely.
So it means nothing. I think that selflessness and humility, those values for me are really important. Like I don't really get much out of achieving something on my own. It doesn't really float my boat. Like it's achieving things through others and knowing that might be as a direct result of how we go about our work and how invested we are and how much we're prepared to give for others to be successful. Like that's for me the most important bit.
Yeah, and I guess I want to just highlight, big you guys up a little bit, that I think that it isn't easy, right? Because actually, you know, like working in a pair, I'm not saying this is what's happening here, by the way, but actually sometimes there can be ego associated to having a head coach and an assistant, and sometimes that's really hard. Like there has to be some kind of like, let's talk about what that looks like. And I think credit to you, Jess, as the head coach, but also like Anna and the other coaches that we work with, we constantly pay attention to the roles that everyone plays in this coaching team. And it isn't just, oh, we've had that conversation now, we need to leave that alone. We talk often, don't we, about the strengths that each individual person has and what they're bringing to the team. We talk about the roles that they might play in that session in particular because of the topic or because of the theme of that session, and whether they've got a role that's, you know, a helicopter view or whether they've got a role that's after an individual. Like we pay attention to that a lot, and I think that goes without saying that for me personally, I think it's really important when you're working in coaching teams to really pay attention to the role that people are playing and how that coaching relationship is going to work, because it takes work. I think when I was learning how to coach, and therefore I was someone as assistant, my main job was picking cones up. Like that's what I was watching and then just helping. And what helping meant was picking cones up and stuff and collecting things in. Whereas actually we're not in this situation where we're building coaching teams now because Anna's not as good as Jess or the other coaches that we're working with. It's not a hierarchy in that sense in terms of coaching ability. It's about leadership and then the strengths in that diversity of the coaching team and how people are bringing their different skill sets and strengths to the coaching team.
Yeah, and I think most probably more so than many coaches that I know, we've had to navigate some quite tricky situations when it comes to role, you know, like, and title, because we've done everything, I think, pretty much, like co-coach together, assistant coached both ways around, director of netball with head coach. Like, I mean, we specialist coach to a head coach, like and that's not necessarily always been easy or comfortable, because you are trying to navigate and protect your personal relationship with somebody. But I think the reason why we've been able to at times get over those little speed bumps is because you're exactly right. My view on coaching and the coaching team is I seek out and encourage and try to get people around me that aren't like me. Like, and I'm not scared of that. I think it's what the team need. But also, I think just going back to your point around like is there some risk in that? Yeah, there could be. But I think because I know that we're putting the interests of the team first, I don't think the title and the role they're not the main driver. They're definitely not for me. So I think that's where it becomes easier, because you just go, well, who are the right people to put around this team, and who are going to get the best out of me, and who's going to challenge me, and therefore I'm going to be better for the team. And I think that makes then those decisions relatively easy, but again, quite unique in the fact that in different environments, we've played different roles to each other. And so we've kind of we've rehearsed that, we've played through it, we've fallen in the pitfalls of that, but we've also celebrated the strengths in it. So I think, again, that just, I guess, adds layers and depth to that kind of trust and respect that we spoke to at the start.
And the learnings we've taken from that and how we've grown and developed off the back of it. Like, I'm hearing a lot around our ability to learn and take from those experiences, reflect on it, refine it, be better for it. And I think one of the statements I've often hear us talk around is like, we need to and have to be better than what we were yesterday. So I think that, again, that pursuit and that restlessness of excellence I've heard you say before, like, that is definitely like ingrained in us, and we are in pursuit of that.
And that, it's different drivers for different people. So when I talk about role, like, do I feel incredibly honoured to be the head coach of the Roses? Absolutely. But did I come into coaching and say I want to be the head coach of England? No, I didn't, because I just needed to be clear what things were important to me. And if that led to this, then that's brilliant, and it's a real honour. But actually, it's not about the title. And I think you've got to be careful not to get in your own way. But your motivation might be different to mine. Title might be everything for you. And so it's the same with players, isn't it? We talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and it's just not what I lead with first. And so I think the only difference really sometimes in how I view my role is the leadership bit, like you say, and some decision making. And I don't shy away from that. So if that's one of the biggest differences between our day-to-day working, then so be it. And I'm not afraid of being a decision maker or making hard decisions. But everything other than that, absolutely, there's no hierarchy, because I just don't think that's right for the team and the players.
And not to get us down a rabbit hole of kind of like the job titles thing and the kind of like what that looks like. But yeah, like, there are scenarios where I think there are opportunities for people to explore what a coaching team could look like. And there might be some scenarios where we do have a head coach and we have an assistant, and that assistant is developing and they are learning. So it is more like a mentor type relationship. And I think both of those things are okay. But I think the important thing is for us and for people working in those roles, not to assume, but for us to explore kind of what that dynamic can look like. We have come to the end. I guess, first of all, thank you for your time. I know that you're busy, a lot going on as we're preparing for end of Super League, as well as we're marching towards
Commonwealth Games.
It is still 2025, everyone.
Every day is a day towards close to the Commonwealth Games.
True. But I feel like there was a lot of rich stuff in there that I'm hoping that all the coaches and people working within the pathways and the England Netball coaching family will be able to kind of grab at least one thing and go, oh yeah, that's made me think about that. So thank you for your time. And yeah, I guess I know I feel very fortunate to kind of be working with you guys and listening to how much care and attention that you put into kind of going about your daily business for the driver of making the players better, for championing our Roses. So thank you. And thank you for sharing that with everybody else as well.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.